After my recent-ish trip down nostalgia lane with the Scooby-Doo games, I found myself thinking about another title from my gaming past, Rabbids Go Home. I had forgotten about it for a while, even though I do have fond memories of playing it, so I felt like a revisit was in order to see if it held up all these years later. So, what do you say we have a little look? Basically the original Minions, the Rabbids started life as enemies for the Rayman games before becoming hugely popular and eventually starring in their own games. I forgot for a minute they even collaborated with the Mario series not too long ago. This was their first solo outing and sees the psychotic bunnies terrorize the human world to collect enough items to amass a pile big enough to get to the moon. The humour of these characters is yelly and obnoxious in all the right ways for me. Playing it now and being able to acknowledge how sadistic the comedy can be was great. Actually, some of the writing for the humans can be rather funny as well. Many of the game's missions take place in shopping centres and airports, and many of the comments heard over the speakers is fairly witty satire which brings a few chuckles.
For your own safety, please alert security to the presence of even people you know.
Like I said, your main goal is to collect anything you find, stuff as the game calls it. Each level has a myriad of smaller stuff scattered about, and it's addictive trying to rack up as high a total as you can. It does help that the movement is pretty satisfying. You're essentially controlling two Rabbids, technically three, but I'll get to that. One of which is in the trolley, the other is controlling. The movement is slippery, but later on you unlock basically a Mario Kart drift and speed boost ability which gives you a bit more control, and it feels really good to hit a collection of stuff in one swift movement. Later on you also get the option to ride across water, and there's further variety and traversal through the large items which serve as your main goal in each level. My favourite of these is the hospital bed. You'll often be dooming a love story between a doctor and her patient by using the bedridden Barney as a glider, offering a welcome dose of platforming in a game usually devoid of it. Leaping in the air by flicking the Wii remote feels good, and it's usually an exciting affair precariously moving from rooftop to rooftop. On that note, this game does make good use of the Wii remote. It's particularly inventive in how you can suck the rabbits into the remote itself. Here you can swing them about or customize them with a fairly deep creator, more options being unlocked depending on how much stuff you get in a level, and there's a couple of minigames you can play later on which are good too. Within levels you can aim and shoot a rabbit out to aid progression or combat. Fighting too has you give the controller a flick to yell at enemies to strip them. The combat is fine. The game does add different enemy types to keep it interesting, but outside of the last level they gave me little to no difficulty whatsoever. 2 hits and they're down. But it's not used that often, so it's mildly entertaining. The only time the Wii remote controls don't work that great is when you're riding a big tire. The way the camera's positioned makes the timing of the bounce a little finicky. But beyond that, the game plays really well, and there's quite a bit of variety within the levels too. Time restraints are added, this satisfying pipe gimmick is introduced, stages switch between linear affairs and small open environments, where a lot of games targeted at a younger audience find themselves becoming overly repetitive. Ubisoft really do try to keep things as fresh as possible. And yet, the game still winds up feeling kind of samey at times. As fun as the core gameplay is, it does suffer because of the game's look. The graphics themselves hold up well, but the locations you'll be moving through aren't particularly memorable. A lot of shops, hospitals, occasional deserty sections. It's all a bit pedestrian and at times lessens the fun factor because you're rarely seeing anything unique from the rest of the levels. I also realise having this hub world area with multiple entrances to the level selection screen is kind of pointless, as you'll be able to access them all even if you keep going for the one entrance. I've gone on in the past about how well done atmosphere can really elevate a good game to greatness. I did so recently with the aforementioned Scooby-Doo games. Not that I don't enjoy the gameplay, but the personality is really why I love it. Rabbids Go Home does have plenty of personality, the titular characters are lovably anarchic, the chaotic score fits really well, and there's some great needle drops too, which make it stand out. But after a while, gags are recycled, you hear the same songs in the background constantly. This damn cutscene is played hundreds of times. A lack of innovation within the game's world begins to show, although the music which plays in the final level gives a bizarrely poignant feeling and context. I found myself with little incentive to beat every level because only a few stick out, and it's not mandatory either. But the core mechanics are enjoyable enough to keep me playing until the end. It's a good game overall, it's just the moments of blandness hold it back from being a stronger product overall. But it does remain one of the more unique titles from my early gaming collection, its quirky edge continues to appeal, and the fluid yet slippery movements are really addictive to control and worth checking it out for. I had a soft spot for the Rabbids back in the day, and this served as a pleasant enough few-hour reminder why.